What up, what up, what up, Entourage? I don't know why it feels like forever since I've done a video, but I kind of like this new idea. So I got a DM yesterday and it was asking me a question. The question was so good that I figured I'd just make a video on it because I'm sure a lot of you guys are wondering the same thing. And it led me to another idea. Since, we're getting into the off season here, even though the fantasy playoffs are still going on, it's going to be hard to come up with content being that it's the off season and stuff. So I'm going to need your help. I want you guys to do with what my man here, Dolph Diggler, in I think that's his name. Yeah, Dolph Diggler on Instagram did, and he DM'd me a question. And anything you want to see content on, just let me know. Comment down below. You can tweet me, you could DM me, whatever the case may be. But let me know what type of content you need help with or that you're curious about. So this was just a question that he was curious about. It has to do with players, why some are clutch, why some are not, specifically quarterbacks. Here, I'll read you the question. It says here, what do you think of teams or single players, especially quarterbacks, that perform so well for a whole season and then disappear forever, meaning never perform with the winning record again or just suck in playoffs? Other reasons, and then he named a guy like Philip Rivers, for example. So here's the thing, guys. There's only a certain amount of really, really special players. And this is just my opinion here. I think it takes a special type of personality to be a leader, to be a winner, to not get rattled. You got to put yourself in their shoes. These guys perform in front of thousands and thousands of people. Not to mention they have $100 million contracts. Some of these players have, and then they have corporate sponsors. They have family. There's a lot of pressure on these guys to perform. Not to mention they're going up against the greatest athletes every single Sunday. Okay, so a guy, and that's why I watch football. And I've been critical of Drew Brees in the past and the present, really. But it's not that he's not a great player. Drew Brees is a great player. But he's not, to me, a top 10 all-time quarterback. A lot of people have him, especially, some of you new guys that maybe have only watched football for the last 5 or 10 years. Everybody's just living in the moment and quick to say, Drew Brees is an all-time 5 great. And he's not an all-time top 10 great. And this is why. If you were to take Drew Brees outside of that New Orleans system, that New Orleans offense, I don't believe he'll be the same guy. He's already shown that he's not the same guy, outside of a dome, that he often comes up short in the clutch like he did on Sunday and the previous 2 years. Remember, guys, they are the first 13-win team to lose in the first round of the playoffs. They lost to a team they should have beat, a team they were heavily favored by over a touchdown. So it's not like he lost to this, great Super Bowl team. Minnesota's okay. They're a good team, but it's a team they should have won. In the case of Philip Rivers, similar quarterback. These guys are kind of system quarterbacks. I think Philip Rivers is more of a system quarterback than Brees, but they're not the most physically talented players. And that's what happens when they face teams that are really, really good, solid defenses. They can get by, against teams like the Dolphins and the Browns and stuff like that because they have very good coaches. Philip Rivers had Marty Schottenheimer, which I think they never should have fired. He had LaDainian Tomlinson. He had Antonio Gates. This guy had weapons. Vincent Jackson. So yes, against the lesser teams, Philip Rivers would put on a show. But when push came to shove, and he had to play against those elite defenses, he often came up short because big players do big things. And that's when talent really prevails. Philip Rivers doesn't have a strong arm, neither does Drew Brees. What they got going for them is systems. And Drew Brees is arguably the most accurate quarterback we've ever seen in the game. He's extremely intelligent. And he just fits that system to a T. But like I said, when push comes to shove, when he faces a really good defense, and I knew they were going to have trouble with Minnesota. I didn't think they were going to lose, but I knew they'd have a hard time because this is the thing too. Remember, guys, Minnesota beat them 2 years ago, so they're familiar with the Saints. They've been there before. They weren't scared of them, and they beat them with Case Keenum. So they knew how to play Drew Brees. And A lot of times when you give teams bulletin board material, I think Cam Jordan said something about Kirk Cousins, sometimes he's proficient. And then, you have the coach playing that underdog role, saying, hey, nobody has faith in us. They got us down by 8 points. That also plays into effect. Okay. And then the first part of the question, he said, well, how come some quarterbacks do really well and they fall off the face of the earth? Two names that right away came to mind was Matt Castle. But really that was the main name. But Matt Castle, this is the thing. When a quarterback, or Mitch Trubisky, you can say the same thing about Mitch Trubisky. He looked pretty good, last year when he first came on, and then he kind of faded off. I thought maybe that was to the injury, but it's kind of like a pitcher in baseball. When you've never seen the guy before, you don't have film on them, it's hard to prepare for something you haven't seen. That's why you've seen it even in the case with Carson Wentz. His second year as a starter, he took the league by storm. He was the MVP, favorite. Same thing with Deshaun Watson when he still hasn't played as good as he was his rookie year, Deshaun Watson. Patrick Mahomes had a little bit of a drop-off, not much, but the thing is now these teams have film, okay? So only the best of the best, are able to maintain that elite play for so many years, like Tom Brady. Now, Tom Brady, some people call him a system quarterback. This is why I believe that's absolutely false. Tom Brady has played in so many systems. He's played in a system where his top receivers were a tight end when he had Gronk and Aaron Hernandez. He's played in systems where there was no receivers when he first started as a rookie, and he had only like Troy Brown, which was okay. They even had players on the defensive end or defensive side of the football coming in and play receiver. He never had an elite receiver, yet still had multiple Super Bowls until he got Randy Moss. And then Randy Moss, as soon as Randy Moss got on the team, they broke records. He threw for 50 touchdowns. So to say Tom Brady, and he's played in multiple systems. Yes, the majority of his career, probably over half, has been with Josh McDaniels. But like I said, he's played, where they utilize the running backs a lot in the passing game. He's played where they barely run the ball at all. He's played with the tight ends were the best. He knew how to use a star receiver. Some quarterbacks don't know how to use a star receiver. And Randy Moss broke the record for touchdowns, and Brady had over 50 touchdowns that season, which I believe was a record at the time until Peyton Manning broke it. So that's what I'm trying to say. Like, Brady would not fall in. Plus, the guy's been to 9 Super Bowl, guys. This stuff that Brady's overrated, that he's a system quarterback. You don't go to 9 Super Bowls. And one of the ones he lost, and he threw for like 500 yards, a Super Bowl record. The defense was a total flop. And that's the other thing. A lot of people say, well, he's got Belichick. A lot of these years, like it showed in that Super Bowl against the Eagles, the defense wasn't very good. The defense got good again the last 2 years. But when they beat Atlanta, they weren't very good. When they lost the Eagles, they weren't very good either. So I don't consider Brady a system quarterback. But going back, there's also that leadership clutch gene that a guy like Brady has. I think that's Brady's biggest thing. Is this guy, he's like a poker player. He's never phased. The moment is never too big for him. And a lot of guys like Phillip Rivers, like Drew Brees, like Kirk Cousins, you see when the moment gets big, these guys tend to crack. Russell Wilson doesn't have that issue. Neither does Aaron Rodgers. I think Aaron Rodgers has another issue, though. I think he has more of a leadership issue than a clutch issue. Because I've seen Aaron Rodgers, win games on a Hail Mary and come back and everything like that. But he's kind of got almost like a Kobe Bryant issue where, his teammates have not always liked him. They find him arrogant. He doesn't always get along with coaches. Although Kobe wasn't really a coach killer, but he did have Phil Jackson for most of his career. But, Aaron Rodgers has got that issue. But Russell Wilson's another player who is clutch. The moment is never big for him. As a matter of fact, when the going gets tough, that's when Russell Wilson plays his best. I think Patrick Mahomes has that. The jury's still out on Lamar Jackson. I'm a little worried for him. It's going to be curious to see, now that teams have extensive film and are not just looking at him like a running back, they know he is a decent passer, what happens next year. I do expect a drop off. And again, it's only natural, guys. When these guys, when you see them perform at these ultimate high level, record breaking levels, there's only one way to really go down. It's called a special record breaking season for a reason. It means it doesn't happen all the time. So I think Lamar Jackson, though, could possibly be that. I think he's got the personality for it. He's humble. He's a hard worker. So we'll see what happens with him. But right now in the league, there's really only a few players like that. And I mentioned them: Mahomes, Aaron Rodgers, Tom Brady, and Russell Wilson. And that's why we see, these other players come up short. And that's why we've seen other players, a lot of you guys don't recognize this name, Jeff George. This guy could throw it out of the stadium, but upstairs, he threw a lot of picks. I think we see that with Jameis Winston. He has all the physical tools. Winston's got a gun. He's pretty accurate with the football, but he makes mistakes. Jay Cutler was another one. Jay Cutler can throw the ball a mile, but upstairs, he just didn't have that it factor. So that's what I'm saying about these guys. And that's why they come up short, because they can get it done in the regular season. But playoff football is a whole different animal. Eventually, it's whoever wants it more. It's talent versus talent. And that's why Drew Brees hasn't been able to live up to expectations, because you're not facing the Tampa Bay defense in the playoffs. And same thing with Phillip Rivers. And Phillip Rivers, the reason I'm hard on him is because the Chargers in the past have had very, very good teams. They've been, a lot of people's dark horse for the Super Bowl, those years when they had LT and they had a really good defense. And a lot of those years, they didn't even make the playoffs. A lot of people had them to go to the Super Bowl and they didn't even make the playoffs. Ben Roethlisberger is another guy I will include in being a top tier quarterback, because again, he gets the job done in the regular season, in the postseason. He's won Super Bowls. He doesn't fold under pressure. So you could include, I don't think he's as good as some of these other guys that I mentioned, but Ben Roethlisberger, the moment is not too big for him, and he's a very talented quarterback. He is not a system quarterback. He's played in multiple systems as opposed to some of these other guys. So that's my take on why some players come through and why some players just fold under the bright lights. Is because they're just missing a little bit. It could be a little bit of a talent, and it could be most of the time it's upstairs, and that clutch gene, it's a real thing, guys. Comment down below though what you think. Do you think I'm not being fair to some of these guys like Phillip Rivers, like Drew Brees? And one last thing, actually, because a lot of you guys are younger and you haven't been watching football as long as I have. I've been watching football since really the 80s, more so the 90s. But the game is different, because a lot of you guys are going to come at me, I already know, with the stats. Well, Drew Brees threw for 5,000 yards this many seasons, and he led in this and that. And I get all that, but it's a different game, guys. 4,000-yard seasons are equivalent to what 3,000-yard seasons were in the 80s. And, basically 4,000-yard seasons are like 5,000-yard seasons now, or 4,000 back then. It was more of a running game. Also, when quarterbacks got hot, teams would literally put a bounty on them and take them out the game, end their season. That's why all these guys like Joe Montana, Dan Marino, what Dan Marino did in the 80s, I think he had a 5,000-yard season, had the touchdown record. That, to me, is more impressive than all these new guys breaking these records where, defensive player can't even touch you past 5 yards. They didn't have all that. They didn't have the, defenseless receiver rule. All these rules were put into place after that movie came out with Will Smith about the concussions, the CTE movie, I forget the name. So you cannot compare stats. All these stats that look really good for Phillip Rivers because we're comparing them to old players, those are going to look like crap. In 5-10 years, where you have Eddie, Tom, Dick, and Harry doing Phillip Rivers' numbers, you're going to see that it wasn't that big a deal for the numbers he had. It's just he's up there on the all-time, and I get this with Eli Manning. He's like, oh, he's top 10 in passing yards. Yeah, for another 5 years till all these other quarterbacks pass him. It's not that big a deal, guys. So, yeah. There you have it. If you disagree, if you agree, I'd love to hear back from you. I'm all up for debates. And also, guys, I'm doing some DFS leagues on Drafters. I partnered up with them. It's really cool. It's like DFS, but you actually go through the draft for that week. So I'll probably be doing a draft for this week's playoff games. So holler at me about that. Comment if you want to get in on that. You could always DM me, like I said, on Instagram, or tweet me. And my Instagram is Fantasy Football Rapper, or you could tweet me at IMFF Rapper. Also, great news, guys. I'm going to be launching my merch line. A lot of you guys been asking me this forever, and I finally found a site where I don't need like a whole website or everything. So I got some merch coming this way for you guys too, so I'm really excited about that. All right, guys. Other than that, I'll see you soon. Don't forget to send me your ideas. Send me your ideas, because just like this guy had a question, I made a video on it. If you got a question, if you got a topic, I'm here for you guys. All right.